Fans of the Soulsborne series love to say that these games are difficult, yet also fair. But what does that actually mean? What does it mean to say that a Souls game is fair? See, I think this question is interesting because I do ultimately agree that the Souls games are fair, and this is a big part of their appeal. But if you really take the time to scrutinize them, it can also look like the opposite is true. It can look like they're quite systematically unfair. And in this video, I want to work through that apparent contradiction because I think it's going to reveal some insight into what kind of experience fans of the Soulsborne series are having, which make them repeat that phrase so often, that a Souls game is difficult, yet also fair. And I think along the way we'll also learn something about the idea of fairness itself, which is actually the place where I want to start this investigation. In general, I think that fairness in a single-player game like Elden Ring, like Dark Souls, has to do with how a player's skill and choice affects the game's outcome. So if you approach a fight and it feels like there's absolutely zero way to win the fight, there's just no choice you can make or skill that you can reasonably be expected to have that can give you victory, in that kind of case, the fight is going to feel unfair. Whereas a fight is going to be fair when the opposite is true, when, to put it simply, you actually do have a shot at success. So if you do fail, you really just have yourself to blame. So anyways, if all of this is right, and fairness is all about having a shot at success, then I'm going to be the first to admit that a Souls game is not fair by any stretch of the imagination. If you just consider the boss fights in Elden Ring, if you just consider Margit, his attack patterns are erratic in these ways that are designed to baffle and trip you up on your first encounter. Like, there is no amount of life experience that can prepare you to deal with his insane windups that take so long. It takes a lot of trial and error to learn to time your dodge rolls around those windups, and I really don't see any chance in hell that anybody gets it on their first encounter unless they're one of those crazy no-hit Dark Souls people. And what's really interesting is that this way of messing with the player with Margit's long windups, that sort of thing was not really characteristic of Demon Souls or Dark Souls. For the most part, those games were pretty good about giving you everything you needed on your first encounter to have a shot at success. There are exceptions like the Capra Demon, but for the most part this was the rule. But as the Souls series matured, and the boss fights became more elaborate, their movesets became more baroque, From Software has leaned into the idea that your first encounter with some of these boss-type enemies should actually be kind of unfair. And it really makes you wonder, what do fans of the Soulsborne series mean when they say that the Souls games are difficult, yet also fair? Because Souls games have always been full of little tricks and traps where you don't stand a chance, and over time this has only become more pronounced. So what's going on here? Well, I think that the way in which a game like Elden Ring, or Sekiro, or Bloodborne is fair might be slightly more subtle than you might at first imagine. And to illustrate this point, let's think about Margit again, because he's such a great archetype for what a FromSoft boss is all about. I do think that Margit is unfair the first time you encounter him for the reasons I mentioned earlier, but Elden Ring also intends for you to experience a learning process through repetition, where you start to notice how Margit telegraphs his attacks, you internalize his rhythms, you get used to his erratic behavior, and then you build your own little gameplay rhythm around it. And as you go through this process of learning and repetition, you'll slowly start to perceive his weaknesses. You'll understand where the openings are, where the traps are. And then, most satisfying of all, there's this funny way in which time will start to slow down. By which I mean all the attacks that once felt impossibly fast and super tricksy will suddenly start to unfold at a pace that feels a lot slower than it used to be. Margit's individual moves will be easier to read. You'll find that for every move, you can see it coming a mile away, you can think of one or two things to do in response, and then you can plan another move to be one step ahead. And all of these acts of interpretation and decisions will occur in a tiny span of time that would have been impossible in your first encounter with Margit. Because that's what repetition does to you. It gives you the power to slow down time, quite literally, until you effectively become like Neo from the Matrix, who just calmly steps aside to dodge a bullet or any other attack. And that's what it is to acquire skill in reflex-based gameplay in something like the Souls series. It's to learn to dwell in a space where time has slowed down. And whenever you're playing Elden Ring, or Bloodborne, or any great FromSoft game, whenever you arrive at that space of skill where time slows down for you, where a boss's moves become legible, once you've finally undergone this transformation, it is then and only then that you realize that this fight was actually fair all along. It might be true that the boss was designed to be unfair on your first encounter, but most of the time, that very same boss was designed to be a learnable fight, to be the kind of fight that gives you the opportunity to literally become Neo from the Matrix and experience what it is like for time to slow down. So when fans of the Soulsborne series like myself insist that these games are difficult but fair, my gloss on what that means is this. A Soulsborne game is supposed to feel unfair at first and be unfair at first. But if you trust them and if you put in the work, you will be rewarded with an experience where you will literally become a freaking ninja. And when you've finally achieved that psychological space of skill, you will be amazed at how the game transforms before your very eyes. Time slows down, everything becomes manageable, and you are in control. That feeling of control is one of the most satisfying feelings I know of in video games, and I personally believe that when people praise the fairness of a Soulsborne game, what they're really doing is celebrating that amazing earned feeling of control. But anyways, that's all I got on this topic. That's my little theory about what people mean when they speak of the fairness of a Souls game. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like and subscribing. That's the best way that you can support my channel. But I'd also love to hear from anybody who's watching. Do you agree with my analysis of the fairness of the Souls games? What are your thoughts on the topic of the difficulty of these games? I would love to hear from you, so let me know in the comments below. As always, my name's Chumpy. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time.